Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Karen Haid, and we're going to talk about her second book, Basilicata, Authentic Italy. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here.
Hello, thanks. Thanks again for inviting me, and very happy to be talking about another wonderful region of South Italy.
Yeah, and I have to admit, until I started doing some of this genealogy stuff, I never even heard of Basilicata. So, I mean,
Well,
I
yeah,
knew Calabria and Puglia and those places, but never knew Basilicata.
yeah. Well, actually, that isn't really that unusual. Um, and also, there's even some confusion, particularly with older people in Italy, about Basilicata, because the name has changed over the years. Yeah, let's say many, many years ago, BC, it was generally referred to as Lucania, the area. That was an ancient people, the Lucanians. And around 1100 or so, in that period, when the Normans came in, the name became Basilicata. And the thought is that it was named after this great, great cathedral that they built. And that held for a long time, up until Mussolini's time, when he wanted to sort of harken back to ancient times. And he officially changed the name to Lucania. So people who went to school in that time period and even used books, and still in some older books, that was the name. And then afterwards, it went back to Basilicata. So the confusion is very understandable. And also another little interesting point is that the people are called Lucanians.
No.
So once again, Calabria, Calabrian, or Calabrese in the language in Basilicata, it's the Lucani or Lucanians, Lucano or Lucana for feminine. And so that also adds to the confusion.
Okay, well, that's good. So I'm not
You didn't
alone.
expect that whole answer.
No, but that's great.
We got that out of the way, right?
And so the original peoples that settled there, I mean, I know it was probably some ancient tribe, but was it predominantly Greek, like a lot of southern Italy, or?
The Greeks were definitely there. There were tribes that were originally there. Then actually the Lucanian people came from a little further north, and they moved in. They were very strong people, but there were various tribes in the area. The Greeks certainly settled there, and many of the cities today were founded by the Greeks. And there are many Greek artifacts in the museums. Then the Romans came, and once again, there are artifacts and many beautiful artifacts in Museum Roman. There's even a town of Venosa that has catacombs, both Christian and Jewish catacombs from the Roman period. So of course it had all of the people who came in, just as in all of southern Italy, all of the for example, then the Byzantines and the Normans and all of the other people who came in and conquered them. So a lot of history.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the tribes is I've posted a couple of things about tribes, and a lot of Italian Americans get very uptight about this tribe thing, and they don't understand that there were a lot of people in Italy that I guess were native, for lack of a better word, that weren't Roman, or there was no Tuscany or Umbria or Puglia or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, life went on before Rome.
Yes.
Yes. And it's amazing when you go to the museums. Basilicata, in particular, has some very interesting archaeological museums. And it's amazing when you see the pottery and the artifacts that come from the tombs, beautiful metalwork also that were pre-Greek. So yeah, it really is amazing how sophisticated people were. That's
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and that, and I know, I know you mentioned Jewish. Again, a lot of people. I mean, I have Jewish blood. I mean,
Hmm.
most Italians do, especially southern Italy. And again, people don't realize that
Right.
they were there. Now, I don't know if they came in because of the Romans or if the Mediterranean and people were just traveling around and they wound up in southern Italy.
Yes, they came in uh, when there were problems in Jerusalem. So
Yeah,
they came in very, very early. I guess I don't want to give a day. I think it's like 79. But yeah, they came in very, very early. And so the cultures coexisted.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and quite peacefully back then.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Hmm.
Terrain wise,
Hmm.
what is it like compared to the rest of Italy? I know they're on
Hmm.
they do have a little bit of water, a little bit
Hmm.
of waterfront, but compared to, let's say, Calabria or Campania or Puglia, which is kind of surrounding,
Hmm.
what is the terrain like there?
Hmm. Well, Basilicata is very, very mountainous. And what aren't mountains practically are hills. So almost half of this little region, which is about the size between Connecticut and Delaware, to give an idea, are mountains and pretty high mountains. And then another third, at least, are hills or more. And then they have a small area of flatland where there's actually quite a bit of agriculture in that flatland. They grow a lot of fruit, of course, grain. And then, as you say, it's this. Some people call it the instep of the boot. Whereas,
Yes, right.
Calabria is the toe, Puglia is the heel, and they call it the instep. I've also heard the ankle bone, which is really interesting because it really gives the idea of height. That there are high mountains, but interestingly, they also have these two little coastlines. One on the Tyrrhenian Sea, and that's on the west coast, and then on the Ionian Sea to the south. And they aren't very long, but they have beaches, and they also have that same kind of look like the Amalfi Coast because it continues down the mountains on the western coast. So you have this beautiful landscape of the Rocky Mountains to the sea. And then on that sort of southeastern coast, you have the flat sandy beaches.
Oh, wow.
So
So that's interesting. Yeah.
yes, and then these mountains. So there's skiing there, for example, and other mountain type sports.
Right. And so I know as you were traveling through there, you had
Hmm.
another train adventure.
Well, I rode on many trains, yeah, and also buses. Yeah, so yeah.
But the one thing that I read was I'm trying to think of how you phrased it about Christ was here, or Christ said don't go there, or something like
Oh
that.
no, okay, I know what you're saying. Yeah, there's a very famous book by Carlo Levi, who was exiled to uh, Basilicata during Mussolini's time, a political exile. Many people, for political reasons, were exiled to the south because they were considered sort of banished to the ends of the earth, and they would be in these small towns. He wrote a book afterwards called Christ Stopped at Eboli. And I read the book both in English and Italian. It's a wonderful book. And Eboli, I just figured it was someplace in Campania, the region where Naples is. I never gave it much thought. I never really looked it up. And I was on the train going from a town called Battipaglia, which is just south of Salerno, to Potenza, which is the largest city in Basilicata. And I look up, and all of a sudden it said, next stop, Eboli. And I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was, Christ stopped at Eboli. What should I do? Should I get off? And everything looked completely normal. It's a normal train station, and so it really went through my mind. Yeah, what's going to happen afterwards? Is it going to be this nothingness, and of course, it was beautiful landscape. So yes, at the end of the first chapter, I say, Jesus Christ, don't stop at Eboli. So whatever you do, don't stop at Eboli. It's a beautiful region.
So what is Basilicata known for? I mean, as far as I know, you mentioned, they have a lot of agriculture, of course, a lot of Southern Italy does.
Mhm.
But is there any certain products that they're known for
Mm.
there?
Their sort of number one product, the most sort of famous product, is the pepperone crusco. Okay, pepperone is a pepper, and crusco, I imagine, stands for the word crispy. It's what they do is they take these certain type of peppers that are grown in the area, and they dry them. So you see these red peppers hanging dried all over the region, from balconies together with laundry. And then they flash fry them in olive oil, just less than a minute, and they get real crispy. And they use these in their cooking. So then they'll take them and break them up on top of pasta, or they'll have a piece of fish and these beautiful crispy peppers cooked lying next to them. So they're really known for these peppers, pepperoni cruschi. So
Oh, wow. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I've never heard of that.
yeah.
It's
And it was not
really
something that's
interesting.
eaten in other parts of Italy. They eat it also in northern Calabria, because the Pollino Mountains, the mountains in the south of Basilicata, are shared with Calabria. So it's sort of one big area. And as we all know, the regions are just political guidelines. Before the regions, people moved around and didn't realize that, oh, we're moving to the next region. They don't eat that here, right? So yeah, yeah. They're also very well known for their wine. There's Aglianico del Vulture. Vulture, it looks like vulture when you write it in English, but it's pronounced Vulture. Vulture is an extinct volcano. So there's an extinct volcano there. That's a really lovely nature area now. There are two lakes in the crater of the volcano, but the land around it is very good for wine. And so the grape is the Aglianico, and they call it Aglianico del Vulture, from the area of this Vulture volcano. So that you can also find in the United States.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
There,
didn't realize that.
yeah, there's the Aglianico also from the Campania region, and then Aglianico del Vulture.
Ah, I'm gonna have to check that out. So, now Matera,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize, I thought Matera was actually in Puglia. And I don't know why I thought that, other than it was, and maybe it was because when I was planning the trip with Letizia, and we were going to go to Puglia. Hopefully, we're going to go eventually.
Yeah.
But she wanted us to stop there, so maybe in my mind, it just kind of, I thought, but it's kind of right on the border, right?
Yes, and you're not the only one. Lots of people think that, because unfortunately, most people who visit Basilicata only visit Matera. And so maybe they come into the airport in Bari, which is in Puglia, and they don't, and they go to Matera, which is about an hour away. And so they assume that they're still in Puglia, because
Mhm.
most of their vacation, let's say, will be centered around Puglia. So no, that's it's very common.
Right, and it's also, from what I've read,
Hmm.
it was almost kind of like a ghost town or nothing there until just recently, right? And now I guess they have the caves and they've started to do a little bit more tourism. But I heard it's a beautiful place.
Yes, Matera is really like no other place, and for that reason, it was awarded the capital of culture of Europe in 2019. So it's really a beautiful place. It's also a World Heritage Site, and what these you hear the caves of Matera. They call it the Sassi di Matera. Sasso in Italian is the word for stone, Sassi di Matera, because it looks like this stone city, and it's been used a lot in film because they to look like, let's say, Jerusalem.
Mhm.
And what it is there's a canyon, and it's on both sides of the canyon. There were some natural caves, but there's also this type of stone that was strong but easy to carve, or easy enough. I've never carved stone. And so the town developed from these caves. Also, many religious people came to the area, and they had churches in many of these caves. So there are beautiful frescoes in a lot of the caves. And so you hear the word caves, and so you think, oh, very, very primitive. But once again, there was a sophistication about them. There was a whole system of water, of canaling underneath these caves, and reservoirs, because the area gets not very much rainfall. And so they were clever people. So they're looking at that, how they used their water resources, looking at that now. Over time, these caves became overcrowded, and people were living in places that were never meant for people to be living in. And so in the 1950s, the caves were emptied out officially, and they built apartment complexes all around in the area, and they were empty for many years. And then gradually people started looking at them, and there's been a rebirth, and you can sleep in a cave. There are restaurants in the caves. It's becoming very gentrified, one might say. But it's a very interesting place to visit because there is so much history.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea that they had that, that kind of sophistication with reservoirs and
Yeah, yeah.
that.
And you can go down and see one. Yeah, very sophisticated. And then also there are beautiful churches, Romanesque churches, Baroque churches on the main level. That's called the piano, the top level of the Sassi. So it's a very interesting place. You could spend so much time there just exploring it all.
Yeah, and I got the impression that I'm going to call them Lucanians, that
Okay.
they were very religious people. Yeah.
Well, you can say that about all Italians.
That's true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, particularly in earlier centuries. Yes, they're absolutely very religious people.
Well, like most of it, yeah, I mean, you can't turn
Yeah.
around in Italy without bumping into a church or a
Right,
chapel or
right,
a
right,
monastery or something like that.
right. And then, of course, every town has their procession, the patron saint. And I went to a couple and they're just very colorful. And I describe them in great detail in the book. But many of them have sort of pagan influences. For example, there's this one that's called the marriage of the trees, and they bring one tree from one forest with oxen, 120 oxen dragging these big tree trunks down, and another smaller tree comes from another forest. They bring them together, put in the town, put them together, and climb up the tree afterwards. But this festival, which is a spring festival, putting these trees together, the marriage of the trees, is together with the patron saint, the procession of the saint. So it's the old and the new.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of that in Italy where they
Mm-hmm.
took pagan customs and
Yeah.
made them into some sort of Christian or Catholic custom.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the parade of the Turks? And I'll tell you why I'm interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's family is Nicoletti, and from Bari, And
Uh-huh.
the legend with the Nicolettis
Mm-hmm.
is that they went to Turkey to steal or abduct or grab, I don't know what the right word
Mm-hmm.
is, uh, the uh, the relics from Saint Nicholas.
Uh-huh.
So there's a Turkish history somewhere, and I don't know how much of it's legend or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
supposedly a bunch of people, sailors from Bari, went to Turkey to get these bones, and they were known then after that as the Nicoletti.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, the Arabs were always trying to invade, and sometimes they were successful in southern Italy, as we know in Sicily, for example, and also Basilicata. And the parade of the Turks is shows the victory over the Turks. So it's celebrating the victory over the Turks. The thing about the parade is it's not really an historical reenactment. They have people dressed up like Turks looking mean. They have harem girls, and they also have their patron saint San Gerardo, who actually goes through the city as a young boy, which there are many theories as to why he would be a young boy as opposed to a man. So it's, and there are flag throwers, and there are many customers. There are 1,500 characters in the parade.
Wow. So
Yeah,
like it's like it's almost like a stage kind of play where they have these.
yes,
Wow, that sounds
yeah,
cool.
and there are the well-to-do noble townsfolk. Those people all dressed up in those type of costumes, and then there the farmer townfolk, and yes, and so once again, it's this sort of amalgamation of Christian and a little bit of history, because also they have this boat that goes through, but there isn't a navigable river in Potenza, so, and there wasn't at that time either. So it's yeah, it's a very interesting parade, and there's lots of speculation as to why these different elements were put together, but nobody can really say for sure. But it's a real happening. So I went to the parade and described that in rather detail in the book. Yeah, that's why you probably saw the Parade of the Turks in one of the chapters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched those things on television. We when we were in Sorrento, um, it wasn't a parade as much of it was the Tavola of some saint. I forget what saint it was. And we asked somebody because we saw them setting up all of these stands and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
I asked somebody. They said, "Oh well, you probably want. It's not really a festival. It's really just food."
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Well, that's we have to eat. That's fine. That sounds good." What I didn't know was that first off, you had to buy like little tickets. You couldn't just pay for it. You had to get these tickets first. So once I figured that out, not knowing Italian, I finally figured
Mm-hmm.
this out. But then it was just this mad rush for these tables of food, like
Oh.
they never ate before.
Well, they bought their tickets.
They had their tickets, yeah.
Yeah.
So I eventually somehow was able to get at least a little bit of food. But my wife to this day reminds me, we hardly ate anything that day because we couldn't get near. You couldn't get near enough to thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, Italians are enthusiastic about food.
yes, so that's what I wanted to ask you about. But besides the peppers, what is there any special kind of pastas or dishes? What I learned just recently, which I didn't know, I watched it from watching Stanley Tucci, that Rome, for example, they had a lot of pigs because they didn't have room for cows. So pigs take up less room, so they had pigs there. And I know Capricoda, where my great grandparents are from, they had they had the sheep. So what are their staples in Basilicata? Because I love food. So
Yes. Well, of course, pork is a staple all over Italy. And so pork is definitely a staple. Um, Cheese, like in all over Italy. Um, the sausages and salamis that you find in South Italy, the type of sausage and salamis. They also have a type of cow or beef that's called the Podolica. It's a breed that's a hardy breed and that is good in the mountains. And it's actually the same breed that carries those trees down that I mentioned
Oh, yeah.
for that festival. And so there you'll find that type of beef in restaurants. Of course, poor people were not eating steaks every night, which most people were poor, as we know. So beans, as in many places throughout Italy, were a staple. Interestingly, there's also a root, I guess you would call it a root vegetable, called a lampascione. And it's this little, what looks like a small onion. And this is very particular to that area. But it really actually isn't an onion. It's really a hyacinth bulb.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little bit bitter. And they will put it in stews or pickle it, and so that's an interesting little vegetable. Yeah, and food, pastas like all over Italy.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Um,
because also the region being very mountainous, it also tends to look at the regions around it. So there's Puglia to the east, and so, for example, there'll be some towns that will eat quite a bit of fish, or along the coast, and then there's Potenza is near Campania, and so there'll be the type of food that you would see there, and same thing with the looking to Calabria, because there are these mountains that really divide the region. And they say for that reason, the region has been an area of immigrants for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there's been a lot of immigration from Basilicata. That's a little different from food, but anyway.
yeah, no, but yeah, it
Yeah.
came full circle. But
Yeah.
and that's the really neat thing I think about Italy too, with these regions, that they all seem to have one or two kinds of things that are just specific to there, grown there. They don't really eat it in other regions,
Yeah.
Like when I was talking to Gianluca and he told me about the citrus fruit. I can't
I mean, the
think of it.
bergamot.
Bergamot, right? That's like, I don't know. He said 95% of the world's growth.
Yes, bergamot comes from Calabria.
Yeah, it's just so amazing that
Yeah, and also
they all have these kinds of things.
Right, and also, for example, just now they're starting to send some of the actual bergamot fruit up to northern Italy. Just now, in these last 5 years, let's say.
Wow.
Before they hadn't done that. I mean, and it is interesting, like you say, the pepperoni cruschi. You're not going to walk into Milan in a restaurant and you're going to find you won't find a dish with that crumbled on top. You could. Why couldn't you? But it's just not like that in Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that so amazing.
Yeah, it's very regional.
Yeah, and even to this, and it's not like it's that big a place, that you.
No, but transportation, when you think of all the mountains, and so it really wasn't as easy to get around as what even in the United States, we have so much flat land. But
right.
You pretty much go by boat, and then you have your donkey, and you you start going up the mountain.
Well, yeah, and my mom's oldest brother, he didn't come to America until he didn't leave Italy till 1950 with his family.
Mhm.
And talking to them, I mean, all right, so it's 70 years ago, whatever. And they, like you said, they were still with the donkey and the horse, and
Mhm.
they didn't go from town to town even.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously in his case, he had his brothers and sisters here, so and they were
Mhm.
sending him money and all of that. He wanted to go back, I think, probably in the early 70s or something, just to visit.
Mhm.
And my aunt didn't want to go because she said there's no toilets there because their house
Okay.
in 1950 didn't
Okay.
have
Yeah.
indoor plumbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and he was trying to explain, no, we're going, we'll be in a hotel. And
Hotel. Yeah.
she didn't want any part of it. She didn't want to go
Yeah.
back.
But things changed so much from
Yeah.
1950s even to the 1970s and then the 1990s. And yeah, so it is amazing. Sometimes you see this sort of old house from the outside and it might not be painted, et cetera, et cetera. And you walk in and there's a sparkling bathroom with marble countertops and yeah.
Yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
somebody just told me that.
Hmm.
He said they went to visit the relatives, and he said the
Hmm.
house from the outside was. We walked in, it was a beautiful place.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
because there's the idea also that you don't want to be the target of jealousy or an envy.
yeah, and I heard that too. That a lot of
Hmm.
people, they feel that way, and they don't want people, which is, I could understand that.
It's partly what the evil eye is about.
Yeah,
That's really jealousy. It's
right.
it's the evil eye of jealousy.
Well, this has been great as always. I really appreciate you
Hmm.
taking the time. For
Sure.
people who want to buy the book, what's the name again, and where can they get it?
I happen to have a copy right here.
Ah, perfect.
Let's see where the light is. It's called Basilicata Authentic Italy. And so you can get it, of course, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's in paperback and also on all electronic media. And you can also order it in a bookstore. For example, I Am Books in Boston has it. But it's not going to be just on most shelves. Obviously, a small book is usually you have to special order it. But yeah, it's very, just Google me and it's easy to find. And I have numerous social media pages too that will help you along, and websites.
Right, and I'll put all those links out there.
Okay.
And there's also a Kindle version for anybody who's into Kindle.
Yes,
So,
there's a Kindle version. There's the iBook version, the Nook book. Yeah. So
well, great. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
thank you. Thank
All
you.
right, take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.